This video is about the Lobit 320R, a crazy drone made by Drogen, a Korean drone company. And this story all starts with Mitch at the Drone Dome in Austin, Texas. Mitch knew that Drogen was looking for pilots to test their products and provide them with feedback, and after crushing the times at the Drone Dome, it wasn't long before I had the 320R in my possession ready for testing. However, it sat on the shelf for way too long until my friend and mad scientist Ribozoid came to the rescue. This drone comes as a plug-and-fly model, meaning you will need to bring your own receiver, video transmitter, and antenna. It comes pre-built in a Y6 configuration and measures 320 millimeters. The package says this is the ultimate sports drone, extreme sports drone, very strong shock. Drogen could probably use some help with their translations. But one of the first things I noticed was how great the documentation was. I mean, just take a look at these illustrations. And by looking at the description, it seems like it has everything a drone could possibly have. The motors look high quality, and 2207 at 2200 kV spinning a 6-inch prop should be perfect. The arms look sturdy, but I'm not so sure about the landing skids. The manual recommends a 4S 2200 mAh battery, and that's good because this thing has a lot of power, but it weighs 740-ish grams without the battery. With the Turnigy 4S 2200, that's an all-up weight of 1,030 grams. That's over 1 kilogram. For comparison, my Flynoceros Skull is 800-ish grams with the same battery and a GoPro Session. DRL's Racer 3 also carries a Session but runs on a 5S 1800 mAh battery and weighs in at 1 kilogram. The first step was connecting the 320R to CleanFlight and configuring it. We didn't want to flash the firmware, but rather we wanted to see what the straight-out-of-the-box experience was like. We ended up having to download an older version of the CleanFlight configurator to make it work, version 1.1.0. This was our first hint that something was strange. The setup was what we expected, but the old configurator left us missing a few options that are standard today. Next, we attached a FrSky D4R2. After making sure all of the motors were spinning in the right direction and all of the 6 propellers were attached properly, we went out for the test hover. As you can see, it went pretty great and nothing caught on fire. The next step was attaching the video transmitter and antenna and then heading out for the FPV maiden flight. So, finally, after months, it's time for the FPV Bon Voyage. Because of the strange Y6 prop motor configuration, I was really excited to see what this thing felt like in the air. This is the default on-screen display configuration, and holy crap, it has all of the things you would probably never want. Maybe if you added the GPS and were flying long range, this would be handy, but it's not what anyone expects. Try not to pay attention to the crappy DVR footage. Video looked great to me in the goggles. The Fat Shark HD V2 DVR just doesn't do a great job. Also, I attached my own video system, so that would be my fault if it sucked. But that's not what anyone came here for. How does this thing fly, right? That's the big question. Well, it feels super stable, and I'm guessing that is because it has props spinning in every direction at all times. Rolls and flips feel incredibly on axis and snappy. It feels heavy, but it has more than enough power to carry the weight around. It felt pretty decent in the air, but both Brian and I noticed it felt like an old multi-rotor. And that is probably because the receiver signal we were using was PPM, not S-Bus. S-Bus is more responsive, and the 320R can receive S-Bus, but we would have had to disassemble it and change a jumper or solder joint to enable that. Also, with the new version of the firmware, the default settings, PIDs, and filtering would be different and may improve the flight characteristics. So the whole reason why I have this drone is because the manufacturer, Drogen, wants feedback, right? First of all, it came with a super old version of CleanFlight, version 1.1.0. As of filming this video, the current version is 2.0.3, and there is a vast improvement in the software. This really just tells us how old of a product this is and how long it may have been sitting on the shelf. There are actually YouTube videos of it flying around in 2015. It's big, it's heavy, and it's not really that fast. And it can't handle 5-cell or 6-cell batteries, which I think would really give it a lot of life. And there's no real obvious place for an HD camera on this quad if you wanted to record your flights in better quality. The landing skids are sure to break. And there are no less than 16 screws to remove to gain access to the inside of the quad if you want to do anything, which includes configuring the on-screen display. Speaking of the on-screen display, it is absolutely overwhelming with the information it shows by default. Also, the voltage readout on the on-screen display was not calibrated whenever I received it. The maximum camera tilt is around 15 to 20 degrees, and that's not really that much. The arms come down warm because there are no vents for the ESCs, which are inside of the carbon tube arms, and there are 2 per arm. 6-inch props are not as cheap or as common as 5-inch props, and every time you crash, you possibly have 6 broken props. It seems like the average flight time with the recommended battery is around 4 minutes. Using the same battery on my Flynoceros Skull with the GoPro session, I can fly for 5 to 8 minutes. Well, this 320R is definitely unique, and the Y6 design seems like it wants to self-stabilize, kind of self-level itself. It is quite stable. They call this the Ultimate Extreme Sports Drone. I'm not sure which sports it is ultimate or extreme at. I'm not really sure who this is for or what this is for, but it is certainly unique, and I'm glad to have it on my shelf. I think the next product that I'm going to review from Drogen, the Puzzle X 230 XG, the Goblin, is pretty interesting and looks like something I'd actually fly quite often. But Ribozoid and I are not done with the 320R. We want to update the flight controller firmware and see how far we can take it. We also want to update the ESCs and see if we can get them on multi-shot. We need to calibrate the current sensor and set up the on-screen display. We also want to add a GPS because it comes ready for it. And we want to do some crazy things like adding a gimbal and a GoPro, because why not?
You've been dreaming again.
Awesome.